Alrighty, guys, welcome aboard to the podcast. LD's so happy to be here. So is Jackson. Look at that smile. Today we're going to go over First Nephi 8. We're going to get into it, get into the symbolism. It's a very symbolic story. It's almost an allegory, an allegory being something with multiple meaning and multiple layers. So definitely there's a lot of interpretation to pull out here. We're going to miss some things, but I want to hopefully shed some insight on this particular verse. Jackson, what is this about? What is going on in this story?
So in First Nephi 8, it's Lehi's dream. And so Nephi and his family, they had just left Jerusalem and now they're going into the wilderness. And this is when Lehi, he has his dream and he's able to see the vision of the tree of life.
Yeah. So he has this dream, right? The verses we're going to get into is verse 5. This is the beginning of his dream. No, verse 2 is when he gets into his dream. He says, "Behold, I dreamed a dream, or in other words, I have seen a vision. And because of the thing which I've seen, I have reason to rejoice in the Lord, because Nephi and also Sam and I have reason to suppose that they have, and many of their seed will be saved. But behold, Laman and Lemuel, I fear exceedingly because of you. For behold, methought I saw my dream, a dark and dreary wilderness." Here's my introduction verse. I think it says a lot that the Lord introduces Lehi in the story in a dark and dreary wilderness. Overall, in the stories in Scripture, before it introduces the hero, you kind of get context, and we'll say hero, protagonist, whatever, representing the prophet or the figure that frees everyone. You get this idea that they're born into a flawed world. Usually, a lot of the time, it describes a kingdom, deep in paganism, deep in sin, whatever, falling through in some kind of ritualistic evil, whatever. And then it introduces them and it introduces the prophet. I think that's kind of the whole story of life, though, is that you get this person, a good person, born into a flawed world and then called by God to change the world. In life, we're going to be called and thrown into some pretty bad and horrible situations against our will. We're not going to know exactly, why we deserved it or why, that came about. But we're going to be called on it to clean it up anyway, because it's our moral responsibility as a follower of God to, attend to your crisis.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I think the Lord works in patterns a lot. So, I think it's interesting that the pattern is with Moses before he met God, saw the face of God, there was opposition.
Yeah.
And same with Lehi, the beginning of his vision, there's he's in the darkest place he can be before this huge blessing of eternal life.
There's a contrast, it's like when you do the contrast filter on a camera, it makes everything pop more. It's kind of like that with the principle of God, that before God is introduced, there's a darkness. Yeah. Well,
Amen.
I'll continue on. It says, "And it came to pass, I saw a man, he was dressed in a white robe, and he came and stood before me. And it came to pass that he spake unto me, and bade me to follow him. And it came to pass that as I followed him, I beheld myself a dark and dreary waste. And after I traveled for the space of many hours in the darkness, I began to pray to the Lord that he would have mercy upon me, according to the multitude of his tender mercies. And it came to pass after I prayed to the Lord, I beheld a large and spacious field." Now, what I'm starting to believe here is that it didn't have a change of scenery. If I mind if I stop here, but I think it was his surrender to God that truly changed his circumstance. It never was a change of scenery, because he walked for the space of many hours, it says. He was on foot going for a while, but it took a change in attitude and temperament to truly change his situation. It was until the surrender that the location he was that changed. It wasn't all the walking he did, which goes to show no matter how much you do it your way, you're just going to end up lost. It takes a true surrender to something higher than yourself to, change your life.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that it says that I beheld. So a lot of times there's that scripture that's without a vision the people perish. And so it's all your perspective.
Yeah.
And I think it's President Nelson that talks about true disciples of Christ can be happy in any circumstance. So it all just depends on your perspective. So he changed his perspective, changed what he beholded. And it changed where he was at.
Yeah, I mean, it was the exact quote where President Nelson said, "Our joy has nothing to do with the circumstances and everything to do with our focus." I think it was a change in focus for him that truly transported him to a different scenery and different location. It kind of sent him somewhere else. Well, should I carry on?
Indeed.
And it came to pass that after I prayed to the Lord, I beheld a large and spacious field. And it came to pass I beheld a tree whose fruit was desirable to make one happy. And it came to pass that I did go forth and partake of the fruit thereof, and I beheld it was the most sweet above all I had ever before tasted. Yea, beheld that the fruit thereof was white, to exceed all the whiteness that I ever seen. And I partook of the fruit thereof, and it filled my soul with exceedingly great joy. Wherefore I began to be desirous that my family should partake it also, for I knew that it was desirable among all other fruit.
I think it's so interesting that like the fruit was desirable to make one happy. It makes me think like it was the common understanding or just like what he thought was that would make him happy. But then the actual like experience of the fruit was like exceeded all of his
Mhm.
expectations because it wasn't just happiness that he felt, but it was like joy.
You know, one of the things I like about this is there's the verse in Enos, my soul hungered, verse 4,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that describes the relationship with man and his pursuit of God very well, because I think you're going to need to constantly attend to your pursuit of God. I think things fall apart in a natural state if you don't take care of them, even if you aren't doing anything harmful, right? Like your house is going to be filled with dust if you don't clean it. Your life's going to fall apart if you don't get a job. Even if you're not doing anything harmful, if you stand there idly, stuff is going to fall apart, right? The same way hunger is, right? If you don't eat consistently, you're going to starve. It's not you eat 100 meals a day. I mean, you eat 100 meals one day, and then for the rest of the year, you go off like a hibernation kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a you eat consistently every day. You know, the fruit being that consistent effort. You know, I think I tie it into that.
Yeah. And like you can see like Lehi is like trying to seek after the Lord, like you said. And like when he says he prays unto the Lord that he would have mercy on me, I have a note here that says like that the tree was like a direct answer to that mercy.
Yeah.
Or, like the tree is obviously like a symbol of like Jesus Christ, and through Jesus
Mm.
Christ we receive mercy.
We receive mercy. You know, one of the other ideas I was kind of deriving out of this is that there are such things as bad fruit too. I mean, like, remember Jesus when he meets the woman at the well? You know, she's drinking from the well, and I think of all the other bad wells in the world, right? Um, like, there's bad water, right? But Christ calls himself the living water. You know, you drink of me, you'll never thirst again. You could find yourself drinking from other things and eating other fruits that aren't, you know, as filling. Like maybe they fill you, but they aren't good for you, right? And that could be whether it could be, you know, some addictiveness, some worldly things, some sinful things. You follow that and you pursue that, and it fills you up temporarily, but it doesn't satisfy you. You know, it's not enough to satisfy. I think it was Ecclesiastes that says, like, look around the world, but the eye is never satisfied. You know, it's like what is in the world will maybe quench your hunger but not satisfy you. I like to think beyond that you know, be aware of what you're putting in you, be aware of the fruit you're taking. You know, there's other fruit out there and it may fill you, but it might not be the best option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to think like I don't know if this is even like a thought or a question, but like what makes a difference for the fruit? Because there were people that tasted the same fruit from the same tree and
Mhm.
were not converted and didn't continue like to stay on the
Yeah.
path. So it's like what makes the difference for that?
I think it's a matter of, I mean, does it say
Is
it
it the
was,
posture of your heart? Isn't that like a doesn't Peter or not Peter? Doesn't Paul talk about like the posture of your heart?
you know what's a beautiful idea though, that kind of made me think of a beautiful idea is that imagine you've been traveling forever, right? And imagine you're deep in the mountains and you forgot to pack your water bottle, right? And you're hiking forever and the sun's hot, and then you get to your car and there's water in there, you know, because you left it. Are you going to appreciate that 5 times more than someone who had water with them the whole hike?
Mm.
I think God naturally puts us in situations where we are going to hunger so that we tend to appreciate the fruit more. Maybe people along that way have had stuff that fill them, right? Like I said with the analogy of you can fill yourself with wrong fruit. Maybe they went the whole way in this state of self-sufficiency that when they got to the tree, they didn't truly appreciate the fruit because, you know, it filled me up just like everything. I think it's a matter of being humble as you take it, you know, appreciating the alternative, you know, and I mean, recognizing the alternative that, oh, I could be hungry and I could be starving, you know. I think it's kind of a matter like that.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that stands out to me in the past few verses is like the size of the area that we're dealing with. So first he describes it as a world, dark and dreary wilderness, and then he describes it as a a large field and the dreary waste, and then he talks about how all he sees is this tree, and so there's nothing really there. So it's just a big space, and then he says the word field, and so like when you think of a field, you don't think of trees, but then there's this tree there.
Hmm.
So it's the only source, the only tree, the only thing that's there to make you happy, and it's in this big giant place in this world, in this
Mhm.
dreary waste, in this field. There's only one source of that joy that he's looking for,
Hmm.
of that thing that can make us happy.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as like being in a desert, you know, because I serve my mission on the reservation and there's like not a lot of trees, but every now and then in these vast fields, you just get a lone tree standing up, and you sometimes get these animals all piled under the tree seeking shade and shelter, you know. I kind of like to think of the branches of Christ, you know, stretching over us and protecting us and, you know, sheltering us from all harm, but also sustaining us with fruit, you know,
Mhm.
not just sheltering us and, you know, avoiding us from the harsh sun, but also, you know, gives us fruit and gives us life.
I think it's interesting too, like the effect that the tree had on Lehi, because at first he's kind of not selfish, but like he's thinking of himself, like have mercy on me, and like he's just confused, whatever. And then he gets to the tree and he partakes of the fruit, and the first thought that he has is to look outward
Yeah.
and like
Share it with his family.
exactly.
I
share it
like
with
that.
others.
There's like a whole family message within
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So like we're seeing like his whole perspective change. Like I like what you said like about like the waste and then the field. Like his perspective narrows down until it's like in line with the father's.
Yeah.
So like it goes from like he's overwhelmed whatever with like all of this stuff, and then it narrows down into the tree,
Yeah.
and then he partakes of the fruit, and it's even narrower to like his family, and that's ultimately like the purpose.
There's
of
beauty
life.
in that message. Yeah. It's like it goes a different way, you know?
Mhm.
I like that. I like that the whole idea of when you learn the gospel, because there was that story of Christ, you know, and he comes across the man infested with demons, right? And he
Mhm.
casts the demons into the swine. And the man, you know, tries to get on the boat with Christ and is like, let me be a disciple. And what Christ tells him to do is testify to the people around him.
Mhm.
It's like your first responsibility is to find Christ, but your second responsibility is to make sure those around you find Christ.
Mhm.
I mean, I find it that way.
Yeah, and we see it with like all through the Book of Mormon, like the prophets when they tasted like the joy, like Alma the Younger,
Mm-hmm.
like his only desire is to bring it to the Lamanites and
Yeah.
like share that joy. So once we like feel the joy, then we want to testify. And
You know,
share.
that kind of takes me back, the idea of Alma the Younger, because I talked about hunger, you know, being a big factor on how much you appreciate the fruit.
Mhm.
Alma the Younger said that as great as my anguish and pain was, so was also my joy.
Yeah.
You know, God can match the evil and hunger in your life with fruit. You know,
Mhm.
the tree always has fruit on it. You know, the tree always has a lot to offer to us. You're not going to get to it and the branches are going to be empty. It's going to have a lot to offer.
Mhm.
There's a lot to get out of that.
And with Lehi and Alma, like you brought up, they both have similar experiences where they both have these things happen to them, and then they go to share it. Lehi with his family,
Yeah.
Alma with everyone else, and it reminds me of like when you're on an airplane and like they talk about the oxygen masks. It's
Mhm.
when they drop down, you put it on yourself first, then you can help other people. Because
Yeah.
if you're not able to help yourself, you can't help
If your
anyone
life
else.
isn't in order, it's not worth, you know.
Yeah, you can't be like, oh, I'm gonna help you with this, but I can't help myself.
Yeah.
You have to be able to help other.
It
help
kind of
yourself.
follows that pattern. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to read verse 13. It says, and I cast my eyes round about, perhaps I might discover my family. Also, I beheld a river of water, and it ran along as it was near the tree of which I was partaking the fruit. And I looked to and from behold whence it came, and I saw a head thereof a little way out. And at the head, therefore, I beheld your mother Sariah, Sam, and Nephi, and they stood as if they knew not whither they should go. And it came to pass that I beckoned unto him, and they did say unto them with a loud voice that they should come unto me and partake of the fruit, which was desirable above all fruit. And it came to pass they did come unto me and partake of the fruit also. And it came to pass that I was desirous that Laman and Lemuel should come partake of the fruit also. Wherefore I cast my eyes round towards the head of the river, and perhaps I might see them. And it came to pass that I saw them, and that they would not come unto me and partake of the fruit. You know, something that has stand out to me more and more as I've read Nephi is that Lehi truly did care about Laman and Lemuel. I mean, there's always that question that's as old as time is, you know, are there bad kids or are there bad parents? You know, people ask that question a lot. I think there's something beautiful in the idea that Lehi did really try with Laman and Lemuel. There's that verse where they first got out of the wilderness and he names the river after Laman and Lemuel. You know, he names it after them. I mean, Lehi truly had a lot of pride and joy towards his children, but you know, they didn't always turn out right. They didn't go and get the fruit in the end. They, you know, sought to rebel at every chance they got, but Lehi truly loved them, and I thought that was a beautiful thing that shows the Father's love, which can almost, you know, in another indirect way represent God's love for us. Is that, you know, we're everything to God. We mean a lot to God, and God wants us to take the fruit, but we're not always going to do it. But it doesn't change His view of us, you know.
I think it's like kind of cool that like the first person that he beheld was Sariah, and like all throughout the scriptures, there's like patterns, obviously, like I said, and like I think it's a cool pattern that like first and foremost, like it's you together as like a couple, and then it's like your kids, and
Yeah.
like I think it's cool that the first person he looked to and saw was his wife.
Yeah.
Sarai.
I think it's really cool. One of the other things it kind of goes along with that. You ever see the verse that's like, man and woman should cleave together as their one flesh? You know, it's like you become as one body when you're married to someone. It's not just like you're coexisting, you know. A lot of people coexist in marriages,
And
you
they
know.
become
It's
roommates.
like, oh, I'm gonna go out, go to my job, come back, and then we're just gonna lay in the same bed. And you know, it's like, no, you're everything, you know, you share everything. Everything, your well-being is their well-being, you know. And I think a lot of people neglect that really fastly. I like that. I like that you pointed that out.
Yeah, and I like how this is about a family. It's a story of a father and his family, and the two kids that are righteous, following what's good, and the two that aren't. And but we're all in the family of God, and we become the spiritual children of Christ. We
Mhm.
become adopted into His family, and so it's up to us to be the righteous children or the unrighteous children. So we're like the family of God, and Christ is like Lehi, saying,
Mhm.
"This is what makes you happy. You can choose to follow and
Yeah.
obey, or." And the whole thing, it gives you an example of what happens because Sam and Nephi, they go partake of the fruit, they become happy, and then Laman and Lemuel, they stay out in the wilderness and they leave. And so it kind of gives you what it's up to us if we're going to choose to follow
Yeah.
the way to the tree or the way to the great and spacious building.
Mhm. And one of the things I really like to hear, one thing I do want to say real quick is that there's an alternative to eating the fruit, and that's wandering lost in a field. You know, one thing I always like to tell people is that there's no greater thing to do in this life than have faith. You know, without faith, I think the alternative to faith, and I always say this to people in the mission, is the alternative to faith is anxiety, it's fear, it's non commitment, and you don't move forward. You don't move forward no matter what. You know, there's nothing better to do in life than have faith. You know, people like to, you know, dodge around faith. They don't like to have faith. They, you know, get really anxious about the idea of faith. But truly, the alternative is just wandering dark in a field. And we know that it's being lost, it's being without purpose, it's being without direction. You're going to always have movement if you have faith. You're always going to be moving forward. I feel like people don't move forward when they don't have faith.
Well, faith is sorry. What was that? Okay, well, faith is like it like leads to everything else. Like
Yeah.
we learn. I don't even remember it. Moroni 7:12. We learn like faith leads to charity and hope, and I think like life without hope is so like it would be so hard.
Yeah.
And President
Same
Uchtdorf-
without love, too, you
yeah,
know?
exactly. President Uchtdorf talks about faith and calls it like a fierce loyalty to God, and I think that's really cool. That like, yeah, faith is like intimidating idea sometimes, but like you don't have to know everything or like know for sure that like a certain principle is true. You just like have to have fierce loyalty to the God that like makes it true. I
Yeah.
don't know if that makes sense.
No, I know what you're saying, though. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and in Ether 12, it talks about how faith is an anchor to
Mhm.
men and it helps us hope for a better world.
Yeah.
And so that's what faith is, what keeps us grounded. It gives us that stability, and then we can go from there. Because if you're going around and you can't even, it's again like the like airplane analogy with the mast. If you can't ground yourself, you can't help other people ground
Mhm.
themselves in the
Yeah.
same thing.
Who are you to give advice if you're not grounded?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, almost if you're a boat with an anchor and a ship, you know, comes up and grabs you,
Mhm.
you know, they could also hold on to that
Both going
anchor.
nowhere.
I think it's
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too that like without faith you can't like really like you were saying like you can't progress, and like the whole point of this life is to progress and become like God eventually.
Hmm.
Like master yourself and like the natural man. And like I think it's interesting that like the fruit was the first thing that came. Like they didn't
Hmm.
grab the rod of iron first. Like they first partook of the fruit, and it's then that they like felt the love of Jesus Christ and were able to like continue on their journey, and like they had to have the love,
Yeah.
feel the love, and experience Jesus before they.
Keep forward motion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This is one of the key verses in the chapter. It says, and I beheld a rod of iron, and it extended along the bank of the river, and led to the tree which I stood. And also I beheld a straight and narrow path which came along by the rod, even to the tree by which I stood. And it led by the head of the fountain to a large and spacious field, as if it had been a world. And I saw a numberless concourse of people, many of whom were pressing forward, that they might obtain the path which led into the tree by which I stood. You guys ever notice how straight is spelled?
Yeah.
It's different. It's a different meaning than just
Yeah.
the regular word straight.
Like
that we think
straight,
of.
like not just like direct, but it's like vigorous. You know, straight means like narrow.
Yeah.
You know, it's like very direct, you know, and there's not a lot of outside the lines. You know, there's a lot of moral gray areas that people pursue, you know, and that's what ultimately leads to failure, I think. I think nothing can pull you away from God faster than standing only in gray areas or standing on the fence with things. You know, being neutral in all causes is what's going to derive you more than anything in the entire world. That's why God wants to be vigorous. There's another verse, in Second Nephi, it describes a flaxen cord. Satan binds us with a flaxen cord, and if you know what a flaxen cord is, it's like a little piece of yarn. It's like you could tear it like a tissue. If I grabbed a tissue and like that, that'd be a flaxen cord. But Satan puts the flaxen cord on us, and we go, "Oh, that's no big deal," and we let it sit there. We let it sit on us, and then we go, "Oh, this is not a threat. I could just yank it any moment." But then Satan puts a lot of them on us, and suddenly they intertwine, and what becomes a piece of yarn turns into a deadly noose, and he's got us by the neck. And that all happened because we were so idle and decided to let those gray areas take us over. A lot of that is why the path being straight is so important.
Yeah, I like what you said about there's not really a gray area. It's straight. It's not only straight in the other sense, but it's narrow. And so we all have in the Christian world today, we have the Bible, and yet there's so many denominations, so many beliefs, so many different interpretations. That's a gray area. It can't be all these different things. It has to be a straight and narrow interpretation.
Yeah.
That's why it's such a blessing to have modern day prophets, and because we reject the idea of sola scriptura, which is that we believe that the Bible, the 66 texts are the canon, and that there's no more revelation, because that leaves it open, that leaves the gray area. And so with the continuous revelation, that path is even more narrow, and we're not going off in these detours. We're able to keep on the right path and have constant correction.
I like that you tied it into the relationship between the Book of Mormon and the other sacred texts, you know. I think it's beautiful to state that. I mean, you ever told someone a story and you told it in a way, and then you told someone else the same story, but you told it differently? But because you told it differently, you know, it brings out a different understanding for someone else, right? You know, different stories reach people on different levels, right? And that's the relationship between the Bible and the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants and, you know, all those other books. Is it, you know, truly brings alive, you know, that connection. It's like a difference between knowledge and understanding, right? Because to know something is maybe just to memorize the words on the paper, but to understand it is to have it applied. You know, wisdom is defined by, you know, knowing something, you know, by definition, but also having it mixed in with experience. That's what wisdom is defined as. And wisdom is very big virtue. You know, it's a very big characteristic of Jesus Christ.
I like what you said about like, I actually don't remember what like the exact thing, but it made me think of like in the New Testament there's a parable and Jesus talks about like the straight and narrow path, and he's talking to the Pharisees who are like making all these rules and everything, and they're more concerned with like the rules than the actual like truth of the gospel.
Yeah.
Like creating a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I think sometimes like one of Satan's tactics is like making us focus less on Jesus Christ and less on the truth, and more on like a way to like be religious.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like in C.S. Lewis.
Check the battery. Just keep going.
Okay. C.S. Lewis wrote like the Screw Tape Letters, and in the Screw Tape Letters, like I can't even remember his name. I think it's like, I don't know. The one devil says to the other guy, like the most important thing is to keep them
Distracted.
distracted and like not focused on the truth. Like they're just kind of like meh about everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's like so true that like there is like an ultimate truth, and like you can't just be like know about everything.
Mhm.
Like there is a way to do things, and it's not just like religious practices, but it all goes back to Jesus Christ.
I mean, it's like Uchtdorf said, you don't water the tree on the branches, you water at the roots, and then the branches will be sustained,
Mhm.
right? All the other stuff is, all the other information about the gospel is an appendage to Jesus Christ.
Yeah, isn't
Yeah.
that what Joseph Smith said? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's just an appendage.
yeah.
Okay. I'm going to skip forward ahead a little bit and skip to, and it came to pass that there arose a mist of darkness, yea, even an exceedingly great mist of darkness, insomuch that they who had commended the path would lose their way and wandered off and were lost. And it came to pass to beheld others pressing forward, and it came forth and caught hold of the end of the rod of iron, which they did press forward through the mist of darkness, clinging to the rod of iron until they did come forth and partake of the fruit of the tree. And after they had partaken the fruit of the tree, they did cast their eyes round about to see as if they were ashamed. Okay.
I really like these verses. We had like a few years ago when I was in Young Men's and Young Women's, we did like a iron rod activity.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that always stood out to me is like these people that ended up leaving and being ashamed were already clinging to the rod. Like true conversion and true faith isn't like holding on for dear life.
Mhm.
Like you feel steady and settled, and you're resting in like the faith that you have in Jesus Christ. And it like just shows like their clinging is like an outward expression of like they didn't have trust in the will of God. for
Well,
them.
it's just like they're only holding onto the rod because they're afraid,
yeah.
but they don't have the love.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like they're afraid of straying off the path, but they're not motivated to move forward, right? They're more afraid of being lost than more motivated to get to the tree.
Yeah.
That's all right. That's actually profound. I like that a lot.
Well, and then it's all about perspective too. Like
Mhm.
I love this chapter because it's like you have a vision, and vision is like all about your eyes, and like all throughout this, it talks about like where everyone's eyes are looking,
Yeah.
and their eyes are cast out, so they're not even like looking to the source; they're looking around them.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, like they were more worried about getting lost than about getting to like eternal life.
It's kind of interesting too, because there's the famous Great and Spacious Building. It hasn't even been introduced at this
Mm-mm.
point. It didn't even take the Great and Spacious Building for them to be ashamed.
Mhm.
Somewhere deep within inside us is this drive that overthinks. It's this conscious, ability to overthink everything we do and second guess ourselves after we follow God. Because you get to the fruit, you get to the tree, you take the fruit, but it just doesn't mean anything to you because your whole journey was more about fear than about God.
Mhm.
So you get to the tree, you take the fruit, and then you just go, And the Great Spacious Building where people are laughing and making fun of people who take the fruit hasn't even been introduced at this point.
Yeah, I think like my mom used to be Catholic, and like a lot of like she talks about like her conversion, and a lot of her understanding of God was like he was a fearful person, like
Yeah.
someone to like be scared of. And I really like there's what's it called? The speeches with Joseph Smith. Oh, what are those
What?
called?
What is that
Guys,
talking about?
no,
I don't know what you're
it's
talking about.
okay. It's like a thing. Anyways, Joseph Smith gave a bunch of lectures. Like
Lectures on faith? No, not
Joseph
that.
Papers.
no.
All right, go on. What is
Okay,
it? What
well,
entails
anyways,
the?
he talks about like he goes into like a lot of stuff about like the nature of God
Mhm.
and like his character, and he talks about like to be like to obtain eternal life, you have to know who God is and like understand him as a person. And like these people clearly didn't know God. Like they were
Mhm.
clinging to the rod, hoping for like whatever, but they didn't know him
Oh,
and weren't changed
Yeah.
by experiencing the fruit. I don't know
It's
if that
like-
makes
it's
any
like when
sense
you
at
view
all.
God as a distant person.
Yes,
That's what I think of.
Like if you
You
were
know-
to know God, you wouldn't be fearful of him.
Kind of a
Okay.
side tangent, but there's the Tower of Babel story, right?
Mhm.
And they build the Tower of Babel, and they go up and they. I think their initial mistake though was viewing that God was far away, because
Yeah.
their source goal was to get to God and get to heaven. But the truth is that the glory with God can be found here on earth.
Mhm.
Maybe the fullness of glory is in heaven, but I think their initial mistake was believing God was far away instead of with us, instead of
Yeah.
present in our lives.
Well, and also it shows they didn't have faith that God would come to them.
Yeah, true.
Like God comes to us, and it like his arms are always extended, and he's like, what did Elder Kieran say? Is that his name?
Yeah,
Kieran?
Patrick Kieran.
Yeah, like he's always in pursuit of us.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the faith to see that he was.
He was
pursuing
present in our
them.
lives. And
Yeah.
that's the thing is the creation story shows the idea that God created nature, right? He created nature. A lot of other, deities and gods and other cultures were found within nature. They were nature, they were the trees, but God is transcendent beyond that. He outlined that, and he was present within our lives. He wasn't found within just something worldly that you could only find it, if you went looking for it. He could be found within everything.
Yeah.
The fact that God created everything, made him present in a lot of things.
Yeah, something I talked to my girls about a lot at FSY, because like in the mornings it was so nice. We had our gospel study outside. Like it was just so pretty, and I talked a lot to them about like nature and like the things that surround us are an expression of like God's character. Like you never look at a sunset and think, oh, this is super ugly, like whatever. Like God created like the beauty of the earth, and that like is a hint of like a view into who he is.
Yeah. There's a real big beauty in the Navajo culture when I was serving my mission, because in a lot of Navajo culture, you could find God in anything. You can find him in the smoke, the grass, the sky, the trees, they found God in everything, which is why they were so, I feel like a lot of the people on the reservation were so, just open to finding God in a lot of things. And they had a special relationship with God because they already were just looking for him in everything.
Yeah.
I think if you make God a conscious part of your lives, you have the special relationship with him.
Yeah. Like, yeah. I thought about that a lot. Like there was a time in like high school where I was just like I was really locked into God. And like every morning I would just like or like everything that happened I would attribute to God. So like even like little stupid things like getting a pull through parking spot, I attributed that to like God. And
But isn't there joy in that,
yes,
right?
exactly. And then you
exactly.
like start to see God in everything. And like I was working in the yard the other day. I was like I had an epiphany. Hold on. I wrote it down.
Okay.
Okay, one second. Yes. I said the things that you thank God for become blessings. So like even hard things like Laman and Lemuel, you see all throughout the Book of Mormon, they like are constantly like having a hard time, even though they're experiencing the same things as Nephi. And it's because like Nephi thanks God for those experiences and like sees God in it, and Laman and Lemuel don't. And because they don't, those things
It's
don't
treating
become
everything like a
blessings.
gift, though.
Yeah.
Because entitlement is one of the biggest, like, it takes away, gratitude. Entitlement takes away gratitude. It takes away joy altogether. I think there can't be joy without gratitude. Believing. I think when you believe you deserve every gift,
Yeah.
it's sad. But when you get a tender mercy anyway, even if you didn't deserve it, that's when life starts to get beautiful. It's like we truly don't deserve what Christ did for us. When can you look in your life and go, has someone died for me? And you're like, no. But then you're like, but Christ has died for me. He straight up did die for me. You've never had someone else in your life do that, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you just said about tender mercies, and this kind of shows. Well, in this verse, it just barely talked about the iron rod, and if someone reads it in a certain way, you could get the interpretation or the feeling that you have to do all this work to get the love of God.
Yeah.
But it's not really like that, because how did the rod get there? How did the guy in the white robe showed up to Lehi and said, "Follow me"? And so, through God's grace, through his tender mercies, he gives us the tools that we need in order to get to him. He's not just, here's a tree, hopefully you stumble into it while you're in this mist of darkness. He has provided
He draws
way.
a path.
Yeah. He put the rod there. He's not just, I hope you guys come. He's like, this is the example. This is the way I want you to, because it's a path leading to it. He wants you to get there. It's just, are you willing to hold on?
Yeah. Last but not least, this is probably one of my favorite, most defining verses in the thing, because it describes the huge alternative to being under the tree of life. It says, "And I cast my eyes around about and beheld on the other side of the river was a great and spacious building, and it stood as if it were in the air high above the earth. And it was filled with people, both old and young, both male and female, and their manner of dress was exceedingly fine, and they were in the attitude of mocking and pointing their fingers towards those who'd come and were partaking of the fruit. After they tasted the fruit, they were ashamed, and because of those who were scoffing at them, and they fell away into the forbidden paths and were lost." So I always, thought about the great and spacious building because there's a very key description of it. It isn't just the building, it's the fact that it's in the air. There's an alternative to the building in the air, and that's the tree. The tree's rooted in the ground and the building's in the air, right? I like to think of the building in the air isn't grounded in reality. The tree is. It's so rooted in the ground. There's a few verses down, a few chapters down too, where Nephi describes seeing the building fall in another dream. You think of the tree though being rooted in the ground, it isn't going anywhere when the wind blows. I truly think that being grounded in worldly things is one of the most self-destructive things when the world hits, because you're going to have a hard day. And what's going to help you? Is drinking going to help you? Is going out and hooking up every day going to help you? Are those things going to help you? Or are you going to be really happy you're clung to that tree, the tree rooted in the ground, rooted in God?
Yeah, I really like that. And like you think about like the ways that Jesus Christ is described in the scriptures, and he's always described as like
Double check. Keep going.
okay, he's always described as like the foundation and like the rock, and like the spacious building didn't have a foundation, and it wasn't rooted in anything like you said, and even like the rod of iron, like you get the sense that like since it's a rod, it's like rooted in the ground.
Yeah.
And so like even those people are like holding on to something that's like you were said, like rooted in reality, and like all of this stuff, like it seems like big or whatever, but all of it's just an illusion.
Yeah. I mean, truly, I think of the building and the tree of life as something that the tree is life. The tree in here is life. It's a living thing, and the building is just a structure.
Yeah.
I think of that building as you can't see the pain of the people too. You don't get a close-up view if you're from the tree of the building. Maybe you're going to look up at them and see fine clothing from a distance, but maybe just slightly below the railing is a chain holding them down to that building. Maybe they're carrying some baggage, and you don't see that, because they're in the moment. I'm sure they didn't have that laughing and mocking attitude when the building fell.
Yeah. Well, and like if you think about it, the tree is like the building is a creation of man.
Mhm.
Like
Man-made
inherently-
structure.
Yeah, it's an inherent man-made structure, and like the tree is given by God. It's a gift from God, and the building was made by man. And like I don't know, I have in my notes like it's a poor imitation of happiness. Like,
Yeah.
Lehi just experienced happiness, and not only happiness, like the greatest joy ever.
Mhm.
And these people are experiencing what they created, and nothing that we can create is going to be as good as what God can give us.
They say the building was on the other side of the river too. And then later in the verse, it randomly describes people drowning in the river. It's like, why the heck would they cross the river? It's because they're trying to get to the building. There's a pursuit for worldly things that can swallow people up too.
Yeah.
I think of it that way. It's like they're trying to get to the building, it's in the air. So then they swim into the river, and then it sweeps them up and drowns them. People get so consumed by their pursuit for fame and money that they lose themselves, and they're quite literally drowned by their own, pursuit of that.
Well, ultimately, I don't think it's necessarily like the fame and money that they're pursuing, but like I think Jordan Peterson even talks about this. Like ultimately, everyone's pursuing like happiness,
Mhm.
and they're trying to find it in whatever. And God is giving us happiness.
Yeah.
It's like a gift that He bestows upon us freely. Like we didn't have to pay for the atonement.
Yeah.
But these people are searching for happiness in all the wrong places, basically,
Yeah.
and it's coming out empty and void.
Rivers in a lot of other cultures and around the culture that Nephi and Lehi came from was a representation of emotion. A lot of times in those cultures, it was represented as emotion. So, in the way they understood in the symbolic sense is that the river was emotion, and people getting drowned up in it almost was like emotional turmoil, right? In that sense. And the building, if it were to fall, would fall in the river. It's like you crumble into this manic state of depression, emotional, and it only pulls you further from the tree. I don't know if the river moves towards the tree or away, but I'm going to assume it moves away. I have this image of people falling into the river and then the rapids taking them away from the tree. It's like you're only going to be dragged further away if you land in that.
Yeah, I think like there's like obviously, I don't know, this is reminding me of the Screwtape Letters a lot. Like he talks about like one of the tactics to like bring people away from Jesus is like getting them so caught up in their emotions and their feelings, and having them focus on their feelings more than like reality. And I think like part of the natural man in us is like very prone to being driven like to and fro
Mm-hmm.
by like our emotions, and they change. but like God is unchanging, and we
Mhm.
can be rooted in, like, it's not like these people that were holding on to the rod of iron that got to the tree didn't have all those emotions and all those same
Mhm.
feelings. But the difference is that they were able to root their feelings in truth and like the rod, and these people don't have that.
Yeah.
They're just driven wherever
Yeah.
because they don't have a focus.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a matter of understanding, because I feel like when people leave the church for certain reasons, they don't fully understand, and that is kind of a narcissistic thing to say. Just, oh, if you don't agree with me, you just don't understand.
Mhm.
But these people clearly in the Great and Spacious Building, they don't understand that the tree of life is the source of joy and happiness. Because if they did understand that, they would be down there. They obviously are misguided, misled. They are misunderstanding what brings them joy.
Yeah.
And so that's what the darkness would do, is it's distracting these people. And so
Mhm.
if they really did understand what was really full of joy and happiness, like Lehi, Sariah, Nephi, and Sam, they would go to that source. But these people, they don't understand. So when people leave the church, they think, no, this is not where I'm going to have my joy and my happiness. I'm going to look for it elsewhere. And that's what pushes them out, is because they don't understand that the gospel is the source of that joy.
You know, the beauty of joy, though, is you see this contrast between the people in the building. You don't see any people at the tree taking the fruit and then looking up the building and going, ha ha. You know,
Yeah.
you see the people in the building up above them pointing down and laughing, you know, but the fruit does bring joy, you know, but the difference is you have this reverent silence, you know, when you take the fruit. You feel this deep gratitude, and that's the art of gratitude. You know, I don't think the people in the building truly were grateful for their clothing. You know, what they were projecting onto the people below them was a projection of their own insecurity, you know, their own flaw, their own weaknesses, and they had to fill in that void by pointing down at the people who weren't, you know, rich and taking of the tree. They had to project that onto them. The people who took the fruit were able to just, you know, silently enjoy the gratitude of God's tender mercies and not, you know, project their insecurity towards the building. You know, they didn't have insecurity because they knew most of the time what they were doing was right. And if the people were ashamed, they'd take the fruit, they'd, you know, take the path away from the tree.
What I think is interesting is like for the people that like partook of the fruit, for them to really appreciate it, they had to have like humility. And something that we talked about in my institute class last semester was like ultimately, because it was about the parables of Jesus Christ, and all of the a lot of them point back to like Jesus is basically saying like, to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, you have to like give up everything and go to like the depths of humility, like go to the darkest places and be able to rise out of that with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And like these people clearly like that are staying on the straight and narrow path, like they have humility and are able to like, I don't know, hold on to Jesus because they know that he's the way. But these people like in the building, they're so prideful that they think they just can't see that.
No.
I don't know.
They can't really see you can't really see the feelings someone gets. I like that there's a humility, you know, being in the building, you look up and you see this big structure in the air and it's hard to miss, and you see the
Yeah.
people and they make themselves known.
Mm.
I think truly some of the best people out there are, you know, we think of big figures, you know, we think of big figures that did a lot, but I truly think some of the greatest people out there exist without us knowing.
Yeah.
I think it's the people that do stuff quietly that make the biggest difference. You know, it's not the people that go out there and they go out and start buying, you know, groceries for everyone behind them in line and then announce it. And, you know, I always think, is it really charity? You see all these people on YouTube giving money to the homeless and they have the camera. It's like, but would you do that with the camera off?
Yeah.
You know, would you do it if the viewership didn't give you the money you spent on that homeless man back? You know, it's like the true good people are the ones who do things without people watching it.
I can't remember what prophet said this, but he said that like the most faithful members of the church will never know their names.
Yeah.
Because like they just went unnoticed. And
Yeah.
like I don't know, I think it's a harder mission to have, to be called to be like unseen and still do good than be like well known.
Noticed and then
Yeah.
do good. Yeah. No, it's definitely, there's a lot of humility found in that.
Well, and charity is the pure love of Christ. And so what's Lehi and his what Lehi is doing is he's trying to offer that joy to other people. And what's the opposite of that is the people in the other building making fun of other people and not exactly helping them out in any way. They're being selfish and they're making fun of the people who are trying to help others. And we see that today when people try to do good, you'll see people doing all this stuff and then, oh, you're just doing that for the attention, you're doing that for all this. And so they're doing the opposite of having charity, which is what Lehi's doing, is by trying to bring his family.
Bring charity and
Yeah.
you know, spread charity. Yeah, I like the inward idea of people who are in that building are holding it to themselves more than, you know, the people at the tree.
Yep.
It's more of a sharing idea at the tree than a mocking. Why do you guys
I
smile?
don't know.
That's
I
weird.
just smiled. I know I started laughing. Sorry.
Man.
I thought you said I love the N word.
What? Scratch that.
Whoopsies.
On that note.
That's it.
Oh, that's all,
Amen.
folks. No, definitely.
Okay, where were we? We're close to being done.
Yeah.
My bad, guys.
Always
We'll
distracted.
just wrap it up right there. We'll just end right
Oh,
there.
that's good.
No, I like that.